Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Medicine of 101. Today we will talk about fetus. I mean in terms of the obstetrics, right? So see, within the fetus basically we will talk about some important topics. So first we'll talk about the fetal hematopoiesis, then we'll talk about the fetal circulations, and we'll talk about some important landmark in fetal development, right? So let's start the topic. So first, we'll talk about the fetal hematopoiesis. Now, hematopoiesis means, what do you know? We all know it's that hematopoiesis is nothing but the what? Productions of the different kinds of the blood cells, right? Now see, for this thing, I'll make some column. Okay. So first point, I'll take the duration of pregnancy. Duration of pregnancy. In the second column, I'll take the site of hematopoiesis, and what are the measures or the main hemoglobins we will get in the different stages in the pregnancy. So I'm writing it over here, the main hemoglobin, right? So see, if I say for the durations of the pregnancy, so until 6 weeks from the pregnancy, we can say that major sites of the hematopoiesis will get where? Within the yolk sac, right? And the main hemoglobin will get over here. That is the Portland hemoglobin or Gauer 1 or Gauer 2. So what did I say? Durations of pregnancy. So until 6 weeks, the site of hematopoiesis will get where? Within the yolk sac. And what are the major hemoglobins? So the main hemoglobins will get over here. As I said, here we will get the Portland hemoglobin. We can get the Gauer 1, Gauer 2. Sorry for my handwriting. Try to understand, guys. See, so until 6 months, right? So then we'll talk about 6 weeks onwards. After 6 weeks, right? So 6 weeks onward, the major site of the hematopoiesis, that will be the liver. Along with the liver, we will get also the spleen. The spleen also will be involved to produce the different kinds of the blood cells, right? So 6 weeks onwards, we'll get where? Within the liver, and within the liver also we'll get the spleen. Now what type of the hemoglobin we'll get over here? Here we'll get to see the formation of fetus hemoglobin. What is that? HbF. And what are the chains? Alpha 2, gamma 2. Alpha 2 and gamma 2, right? After that, we'll talk about the after 20 weeks, right? After 20 weeks. So if I write it over here, 20 weeks onward, the major site of the hematopoiesis, that will be the bone marrow. What's the red bone marrow, right? So here it will be the bone marrow, and here we'll get the mature hemoglobin, that will be the HbA. So it's the mature hemoglobin we'll get over here, right? Now, frequently asked questions from this topic, I mean the fetal hemoglobin. So let's have some words about the fetal hemoglobin. So I'm writing it over here, the fetal hemoglobin. Okay, the fetal hemoglobin C, what did I say? It is having the two chains, what? Alpha and gamma. So we'll get 2 alpha and 2 gamma. So I'm writing once again alpha 2 and gamma 2 over here. The second thing, they are having the affinity for the oxygens. They are having the more affinity for oxygens with comparisons to the hemoglobin A. So we can write it over here, affinity for oxygen more than the what? More than HbA. Okay. The next point, we are having the low concentration of 2,3 bpg. Okay, in biochemistry I have already explained these things in details. Okay, you can watch over it there. So in these cases we'll get the low 2,3 bpg and low carbonic anhydrase. low carbonic anhydride. Another important thing you need to know over here, during birth, right, the amount or the concentrations of the fetal hemoglobin, that will be near about 75 to 80%. So what did I say? During birth, the concentrations or the percentage of fetal hemoglobin, that will be around 75 to 80%. So here we get, so during birth, the concentrations for fetal hemoglobin, that will be around 75 to 80%, and at 6 months after birth, or you can write at 6 months of birth, at that time the major hemoglobin, the major or the main, sorry, I should say the main hemoglobin over here, that will take over the duty, that will be the HbA. And after 6 months, the concentrations or the percentage of the fetal hemoglobin, that will be less than 1%. Yes, that's right. So here the fetal hemoglobin concentration, that will be less than 1%. So this was all about the the fetal hematopoiesis, the site of hematopoiesis, what are the main hemoglobins, and the durations in terms of the pregnancy, that means in the prenatal and the postnatal also, right? The next topic, we'll talk about the fetal circulation. So we'll talk about fetal circulation. Now we can remember one thing, that the amount of the hemoglobin in fetus there, that is near about 16 to 18 grams. So what did I say? Let's write it over here. So the newborns are having, newborn, the hemoglobin concentrations, that will be 16 to 18 gram per deciliter. Okay. And the next part we'll talk about the fetal circulation. So at first I did cover what the fetal hematopoiesis. In the next part I'll cover the fetal circulations. So fetal circulation is very very important topic as far as the anatomy and embryology, whatever, and the obstetrics you can say also. So let's continue for the fetal circulations. I think this place, this is space is enough to discuss. Let's try on. Now, see, now the fetal circulations, if we say over here, the fetal circulation, as we know, that starts from this placenta, For example, I am just taking this, the placenta, and from the placenta, the blood, we can say the oxygenated blood, through the umbilical vein, through the umbilical vein, it will go to where? Let's write it over here first. Maximum amount of the blood from the placenta, and very little amount of the blood, for example 8 to 10% of the blood, okay, through the portal sinus. So very least, that means near around 8 to 10% of the blood from the placenta through the portal sinus. It's not working, let's change it. So I'm using one color only. So portal sinus, that will go where? That will reach where? Within the liver. So maximum amount of the blood from the placenta, that will go where? Ductus venosus. So most of the, I should say the maximum amount of the blood from the placenta, that will be taken by whom? By the ductus venosus. Now another important thing is over here. I should say, of course I should say, but unfortunately the ink is end. The ink has been ended anyway, but I have to change it anyway. See, so from the ductus venosus, the maximum amount of the blood, that will reach where? That will reach, I'm so sorry guys, I have to use single color only. That will reach where? Within the inferior vena cava. That will reach where? Within the inferior vena cava, right? So what did I say? From the placenta, the most maximum amount of the blood, that will be that will be what? That will be sent to the inferior vena cava by the ductus venosus. By the ductus venosus. Now, from the inferior vena cava, the blood that will reach where? From the inferior vena cava, the blood that will reach to the what? Right atrium. Right atrium simply. And from the right atrium, as we know, the blood through the foramen ovale. Through the foramen ovale, that will reach your left atrium. Left atrium, as we know, right? So this is the what? This is nothing but the foramen ovale. Foramen ovale, right? Foramen ovale. And from the left atrium, the blood that will reach where? Within the left ventricle. I should say over here. Left ventricle. Now from the left ventricle, the blood that will be sent by whom? By what? By the aorta, right? So from the left ventricle, the blood that will go where? Within the aorta, and from the aorta within the systemic circulation, as you know. So from the left ventricle, it will go to the where? It will go to the, as you know, simply the aorta. Okay. And from the aorta, it will go to the systemic circulation. Don't worry, I'll repeat once again. And from the systemic circulations, you know, the deoxygenated blood that will be taken by what? That will be taken by the umbilical vein. Wait 1 minute, please. Okay, let's continue. So, from the systemic circulations, what did I say? From the systemic circulations, the blood that will be sent to the different parts of the body, and after that, as we know that the blood, you know, by the umbilical vein that will reach where? Again within the placenta, from here to come over here. Right. Now, see one thing over here, that whenever the blood that is going where? Within the inferior vena cava. Now within the inferior vena cava, the blood will also get to see that from the liver also, and from the lower limb. So liver plus lower limb. From these two regions also the blood that will reach where? Within the inferior vena cava. And within the inferior vena cava, the deoxygenated blood that will be found medially. So on the medial directions we'll get to see the what? Deoxygenated blood. And within the lateral side, we'll get to see the oxygenated blood over here. Right? Now see, from the another important thing, see, we need to know over here that from the right atrium, the blood that will go where? Within the what? As you know from here, through the tricuspid valve, it will go where? Within the right ventricle. Alright. So from the right ventricle, it will go to the where? It will go to the, from the right ventricle, as we know, it will go to the pulmonary artery, and from the pulmonary artery, near about only 10% of the blood, 10% of the total blood that will reach within the lungs. So what did I say? From here 10% that will go where? Within the lung. So try to understand an important thing. And another important thing over here, that 90% of the blood, so I should say over here, 90% of the blood through the, what did I say, 90% of the blood from the pulmonary artery, that will go where? That will go to the ductus arteriosus. And from the ductus arteriosus, the blood that directly will go where? Within the aorta. And from the aorta again within the systemic circulations, like this it will continue. and the 10% blood that came where within the lung. From here the blood that will reach where within the left atrium. So what did I say you? With the fetal circulation, let's revise once again in a nutshell. At first from the placenta, that blood that will go. At first from the placenta, the blood that will reach where? That will reach within the ductus venosus. And from the ductus venosus, that will reach up to the inferior vena cava. And from the inferior vena cava, as I said, that will reach where? Within the right atrium. From the right atrium through the foramen ovale, that will go to the left atrium, right? And from the left atrium, as we know, it will go to the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, it will go to the aorta, and from the aorta, it will go to the within the systemic circulation, right? Now, another thing is over here, as I said, that from the right atrium through the tricuspid valve, the blood that will go within the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle, the blood that will reach up to the pulmonary artery. And from the pulmonary artery, 10% of the blood that will go within the lungs, and most of the blood, near about 90% of the blood, that will go within the aorta via ductus arteriosus, and from the aorta again it will go within the systemic circulations, and it by the umbilical vein it will reach again within the placenta. So this is nothing but the fetal circulation, right? So we are getting the two sons, especially over here. One we are getting the ductus venosus, another we are getting over here, that's the ductus arteriosus, right? So this all important thing you have to remember over here. Okay. Now we'll go to the important landmark in the fetal development. Important landmark in the fetal development. So let's talk about those things over here. I think. Okay. So the first we'll talk about the breathing. So within the important landmark for the fetal development, if we talk about in terms of the breathing that starts within, we can say over here, near about 11 weeks. So breathing starts within the 11 weeks, right? Then the next one, that the swallowing, fetal swallowing, of course, that will be seen within the 10 to 12 weeks. 10 to 12 weeks, right? The third important thing over here that we can also say that, okay, cardiac functions that will be started by 5th week. So 5th week, that means after 3 weeks of fertilizations, after 3 weeks of fertilization. So what did I say? The swallowing that will be started by 10 to 12 weeks. The cardiac function that will be started by the 5th week. Now we'll talk about the fetal limb movement. Fetal limb movement. Wait a minute. So the fetal limb movement that will be started by the 7th weeks. But the mother's conceptions, or the mother can understand, guess that fetal is what the mother can understand the movement of the fetus. So that is known as a quickening. So quickening, that means the fetal movement that will be felt by the mother. The fetal movement, okay, that will be felt by the mother. That will be started around by 18th weeks. So quickening means the fetal movement that will be understood by the mother, and that we can see in terms of that 18 weeks in single gravida. In multiple gravida we can see in 16 weeks. Okay, maybe just like this. Okay, then yes, fetal urine productions. Fetal urine productions that will be started by 8 to 11 weeks as early as possible. 8 to 11 weeks, in this times the fetal urine productions that will be started. Definitely that will be started within the 12 weeks, right? Another important thing, there is a surfactant. The surfactant productions. The surfactant production starts at 20th week. Now the surfactant productions, what did I say? The surfactant productions that will be started at 20th week, right? So what did I say? The surfactant productions within the fetus that will be started by 20 weeks, right? And the surfactant that will be found within the amniotic fluid that will be by 30 weeks. So what did I say? The surfactant productions that will be started by 20th weeks, and the surfactant that will be found within the amniotic fluid by 30 weeks. Surfactant in amniotic fluid by 30 weeks. Alright. So these are the important landmarks in the fetal development. Now we can also get to see in terms of that, I'm so sorry guys, let's continue. Okay, so these are the important landmarks we can get over here, and we can also get to see the gonadal development. In gonadal development we'll get, so see, the gonadal development we'll get to see around at 7th week. Around in 7th week. So at 7th week we'll get to see the gonadal development, right? Apart from that, see, basically the gonadal development, the testicular development in terms of the male, that will be more, previous than the female. So another important thing, the gonadal development that will be seen first in the male, then it will be seen in the female. But if you talk in terms of the external genitalia, so in external genitalia, that will be first seen in terms of the female first, then in male. So in the external genitalia, the first it will be seen in terms of the female, then it will be seen in the male. Now we'll talk about that what? The lung function test, the lung maturity. For example, any individuals, if we get to see that the premature baby, if we get to see the premature fetus, within the premature fetus, the amount of the surfactant that will be very less. So that will be not enough for the fetus to survive. That's why we can test, that lung function test in terms of the surfactant. So let's talk about that thing. Okay. So what did I say over here? The lung function test, or rather you can say the lung maturity test. So lung maturity test. So in terms of the lung maturity test, what can we do over here? First, we have to extract the amniotic fluid. Okay. So we have to extract the amniotic fluid by amniocentesis. So first we have to take the amniotic fluid. So amniotic fluid by amniocentesis. By amniocentesis. So by amniocentesis we have to take out the amniotic fluid. After that we have to check the most common test. The most common test we do over here, that's the ratio for lecithin and sphingomyelin. So if we get to see the ratio of lecithin, L for lecithin, S for sphingomyelin. So I am writing over here L for lecithin and S for sphingomyelin. Now see, if we get to see the ratio of lecithin and sphingomyelin within the amniotic fluid more than equal to 2, if we get to see more than equal to 2, that means the lung is matured. Lung maturation is completed. But if we get to see the ratio for lecithin by sphingomyelin less than equal to 2, that means the lung is not mature. Lung isn't mature. This is the most common test we do basically, right? That the ratio for the lecithin and sphingomyelin. Now another important thing, test, rather I should say, is the most specific and the best one. So the best test, that's the phosphatidylglycerol. Phosphatidylglycerol. If we get to see this component within the amniotic fluid, the phosphatidylglycerol, if we get to see the presence of this, compound within the amniotic fluid, that means the lung is matured. If it is positive, yes, then the lung is matured. If it is not present, if it is absent, rather we can say, that means the lung isn't matured. Okay. The other test over here we can also get to see that in terms of the SEC test. So I'll not write in details. I'm saying that orally the SEC test. So basically what do we do? Let's see. So in this process basically we take out the amniotic fluid by the amniocentesis. After that we just add the alcohol along with the amniotic fluid, right? And we just shake it. After shaking, if we get to see the bubble formations, because as we know, what do we know, that the surfactant, that is a what, swappy in nature, that is swappy in nature. Now whenever the surfactant that will be added along with the alcohol, and if we shake it once, then we will get to see the bubble formations. If we get to see the bubble formations, that means yes, the surfactant is there, that means the lung is matured. But if we get to see the absence of the bubble formations, that means the lung is not mature, that means that there is the absence of surfactant, right? So that is known as the SEC test. So another important one, as I said, that is the SEC test. SEC test. Okay. The third one is the lamellar bodies. Now lamellar bodies, what it is basically. So lamellar bodies are nothing but the packets of the surfactant, right? So the lamellar bodies, if the lung is matured, then there should be the enough number of the lamellar bodies. So on the basis of that, okay, let's erase this part. Now on the basis of the lamellar bodies, so if we get to see the presence of the lamellar bodies, that is less than 15,000, okay, per microliter. So if you get to see less than 15,000 per microliter, that means the lung is not matured, no maturations. If we get to see in between 15k and 50,000 K per microliter, that means this is the intermediate conditions. If we get to see that the more than 15,000 per microliter, the lamellar bodies, that will be that means the mature lungs, that is enough amount of the surfactant, right? So this is the enough amount of the surfactant. So whatever the test we can do over here, as I said in the first, that we can go for the lecithin sphingomyelin. Second, I said the best test, that is the phosphatidylglycerol. You can check out for the phosphatidylglycerol within the amniotic fluid. If it is present, that means the lung is mature. If it is absent, that means the lung is not mature. Apart from that, I said about the lamellar bodies. So lamellar bodies is nothing but the, as I said over here, this is the packet of the what? These are the packets of surfactant. So whenever we get to see less than 15,000 per microliter, that means it is not matured. If it is in between the 15,000 and 50,000, so it's the intermediate conditions. And if we get to see the more than 50,000 per microliter, that means the lung is matured over here. And another one, we can go for it, but as you know that within the amniotic fluid, right? See, within that is known as Nile blue test. So Nile sulfate blue, or I should say Nile blue sulfate test. So what we do basically in this case is we take out the amniotic fluid by the amniocentesis process, as we did before also. After that, see, we add that sulfate, Nile blue sulfate. It's a dye. It's some kind of the dye. So we take out the amniotic fluid. After that, we just add this dye along with these things. After that, if we get to see that the cells we are taking from basically we take the what, the phosphoglycan, the cells normally, that is the what, we can say the skin cells, for example. If we take out the skin cells, because the same component of the cells that will be also present in the lungs, right, in terms of the normal cells, right, the compositions in terms of what, in terms of that membrane. So skin cells, and if we add the dye along with these things, after that we'll get, if we get to see that the cells, that more than 50% of the cells, more than 50% of the cells, if they're converted into orange, that means the lung is matured. So 50% of the cells, if we get to see the orange, that means the lung is matured. And if we get to see less than 50% of the cells are getting converted into orange, that means the lung is not matured over here, right? So these are all about that lung function test or the lung maturity test in terms of the fetus. So this was all about that fetal, in terms of the fetus, the milestone questions, or you can say that most expected questions in different medical entrance exams. So keep watching, keep learning, keep hammering, you'll be successful. And thanks for watching.